Bienvenidos a este nuevo vídeo de Devir TV. Estamos tempranito antes de que la feria abra en el stand de Ares con Roberto Di Meglio. How are you, Roberto?
Benissimo. Buenos días. I'm fine.
Yeah. Roberto, Ares tienen uno de los juegos más importantes de la feria, un juego súper esperado, que es War of the Ring, The Card Game, el juego de cartas que saldrá pues, en el 2023 en nuestros mercados. Y con Roberto vamos a hablar de este maravilloso juego pues, en el que él ha estado muy involucrado y que es una pasada. Roberto, we are super excited with this release. We played it last Essen in a prototype.
And we won.
We won because it's a game that you play by teams, and we beat the ass of Xavi and Litu, so
So great.
it was a great one. And now we have the final copy here, the final production, and we can be more happy.
Yeah,
I hope you too.
Yeah. It's. I think it's been amazing how the people has been receiving the game at the various shows we introduced it before, and here in Essen, it's really heartwarming. You know, after so much work we put into it in development and playtesting, and trying to create something which could. Create the same kind of vibe with our players as the board game does, as the War of the Ring board game does.
I think this was quite a challenge because War of the Ring is a super complete game, happens a lot of things. So how you put it in a card game? How it works?
That's been quite a challenge. I think which as with all these kind of efforts start with a very good designer, which is Ian Brody. Ian has been the one who actually was proposing the idea of using his skills, because he's creating card-driven games for many years, the Quartermaster series, Quartermaster General series, which is very well renowned on the market for many years now, and he's really good in creating card-driven simulations. And so it started with his idea to, let's do something like Quartermaster General but with War of the Ring. And after some discussion, in the end we decided, no, we don't want to do just another board game card-driven, because in a way even War of the Ring, the board game, is card-driven, is a mix of card and dice-driven. And so he said, okay, but we want you to create something which is a pure card game. And he took up the challenge, and we started from there. The core idea is, of course, we don't want to recreate the exact same mechanics, but we wanted to recreate the same kind of emotions. So we wanted to have a good representation, to be faithful to the theme. First, we wanted to have this same kind of struggle that you have in the board game. Okay, I have to get the Fellowship through and get Frodo to Mount Doom, or I want to stop Frodo and corrupt Frodo on the shadow side. But we also have to have the military part of the game with the armies rolling out, and you know that you don't ever have all the capabilities, all the strength to do everything you want. So where do I put my attention? I put my attention to the Fellowship journey, or do I put my attention to the military conquest in Middle-earth? And we wanted the card game to recreate this kind of feeling. And we also wanted to create that feeling that the Free Peoples seems to be the underdog, seems to be the one which are on the losing side, because they have less actions, less resources than the Shadow, but in the end, through the prowess of their characters, they can get it through. So it was more like recreating the emotions that War of the Ring provides, rather than just carrying the mechanics straightforward from the board game to the card game.
Very good. So, as in War of the Rings, we played by two teams.
Yes.
In War of the Ring is 2 players. Here you can play until 4.
Yeah, exactly. Let's say that in fact both games are 2 to 4 players.
That's
You know, War of the Ring is There's a lot of debate. Say more or less, most people think that okay, this is really a two-player game. I quite like the way it plays as a team game, two against two.
Yeah.
But yes, in terms of the design process, it started as a two-player game. Then we started thinking, okay, what can we do to make it into a four-player game? So it's clear that the four-player game is a variant, is a version, a good one, I think, but it's a variant of the two-player version. Here, in a way, it happened the opposite process. So we wanted, as a first step, to say, okay, as War of the Ring is so well known being a great two-player game, here let's start with the multiplayer experience. So, and this is also similar to what happens with the Quartermaster General series, which are games for 4, 5, 6 players, more than 2. And so we wanted to start with the multiplayer experience and to design the game around the multiplayer experience, and then a lot of development time went into trying to adapt this multiplayer experience into a good 2 or 3 player experience. So this is born as a 4-player game, probably gives its best as a 4-player game, but I think it's still very fun and very playable even if you're less than 4 people.
Cool. And it's like you play the shadow, but one of the factions.
Exactly.
And your teammate plays another faction of the shadow.
Exactly. So the game is split between 4 players. The game cards are split between 4 players. 2 players playing as the free peoples, and 2 players playing as the shadow. So you win or lose as a team. Each of these decks is strongly asymmetrical, so to represent the specific features of these factions. So the first free people player plays with, we call it the Frodo deck, from the main character in the deck, and it's a mix of hobbits, wizards, Rohan cards, and the only dwarf in the game at this moment is Gimli, but more will come in the expansion that we have planned.
Oh, our expansion coming?
Just one, not 100. And there is the Mordor player, so the one player essentially playing with all the Mordor cards, so orcs, Nazguls, and all their, say, the big Uruks and trolls. And we have the other free people player plays with a deck with Dunedain and Elves. So people familiar with War of the Ring, the board game, recognize the faction split is pretty similar to how you split the teams when you play the board game, with one player playing Gondor and the Elves, and the other player playing the North, Rohan and the Dwarves. So it's very similar, and even in a way the function of the deck is different because, of course, Gondor and Elves are very powerful militarily, but they also provide a lot of cards which can help and support the other free people deck. So, for example, you've got in the Elves deck cards which can help the hobbits out. So it's not just everybody playing on his own, but you must also think of what the other players in the team might need. And the fourth player is the Saruman deck. Saruman deck includes Saruman and Isengard forces, of course, but also the monsters of Middle-earth and the Southrons. Yeah, so each of these decks is built out of a selection of the different factions in the game.
Very good. So it's only cards, but how it works?
The main engine is based on 2 different kind of cards that we call location cards. So as I said in the beginning, we wanted to recreate this feeling of the journey of the Fellowship while the war rages on over Middle-earth. So this is achieved by 2 different types of cards. So we get Free People's Battlegrounds, we get Shadow Battlegrounds, and we get the Path of the Fellowship. The Path of the Fellowship is a set of 27 cards, 3 for each of the 9 steps in the Fellowship journey as we divided the journey. Each of these set of cards relates to one slice, let's say, of the Fellowship journey. So step 1 cards are more or less around the Shire. All step 2 cards are more or less between the Shire and Rivendell. By the way, this is all John Howe's and Fatanea Howe's art, so it was created specifically for the game. So it's really a beautiful gallery of 27 landscapes, so Middle Earth, depicting essentially all the journey from the Shire until, of course, the depths of Mordor and Mount Doom. So in every round of the game is played over several rounds. At the beginning of every round, depending on which one is the first player, so when the first player is a free people player, you will reveal one free people battleground. When the first player is a shadow player, you will reveal a shadow battleground at the beginning of the round, and then you reveal one new path in the journey of the Fellowship. So you will begin in one random, so there is some variability from one game to the next depending on which cards show up. So you will draw one random battleground from the battleground deck, and you will draw one random path from the path deck. So now these are the two active locations representing which battle can be potentially fought in this round and which is the region where the Fellowship is journeying through. Now, on these cards, essentially, the players will play over them with their, we'll call them faction cards, because each of them is a faction, essentially. With their game cards, you will play to protect or hinder the Fellowship journey on the location. You can play your cards, so for example here, Pelargir can be assaulted by Southrons, so the Saruman player might be playing his Southron cards to attack Pelargir.
Okay.
While the Dunedain and the Wizard faction might be involved in protecting.
Only the Dunedain
exactly.
And the Wizards
can defend it.
Can defend.
And this is very important because, of course, we know game board. Still, we wanted to keep the theme and the feeling, the geography of Middle Earth to make sense. We didn't want people getting out of a ship and magically being on the other side of Middle Earth.
Like in some series from Amazon.
Some series which I want to mention. So we want to have armies teleporting from one part of Middle Earth, or say like elves showing up in Helm's Deep as well. So we want to keep the same kind of narrative consistency that we find in the books, and to keep the geography and the logic that could happen in a War of the Ring board game situation here. So, for example, soldiers of Gondor and Guahir can protect Pelargir against the assault of the Southrons. And similarly, on the locations, you can play your characters. So, for example, you could have, I don't know, Fatty Bolger helping the hobbits in the Shire, while a couple of Nazguls have been sent there to go and look for Frodo. And so of course, the effects of what happens here is based both on the card text, which, as in any card game, can manipulate any kind of game situation, and also sometimes, for example, it is possible to have multiple battlegrounds in a round. Sometimes it is possible that a battle which has been resolved in a previous round is fought over again. So it's not so straightforward that, okay, there's Pelargir out, we bid for it, whoever wins it takes it. Is a little bit more nuanced than that. So this is the core system. So you resolve all potential card effects, and then at the end of the round you will compare the attack strength of the attacking cards against the defense strength of the defending cards. And similarly on the battleground, if there are icons on the path, then of course they will add to the defenders some garrison or intrinsical defense of the card. So here, for example, it's 1, 2, 3 against 1, 2, 3. So there would be a tie. The tie is assigned to the defender side. Okay. These cards are also the way you score points, essentially. So you win by collecting victory points because you win battlegrounds. Or if you win the path as the Fellowship player. So for example here, the Shadow would be winning because we've got 2 attack icons for the shadow and just one defense icons for the three people, and the back end has no built-in defense. So here the shadow would win, and 2-1 they would score one corruption on the ring bearer. So essentially it's one victory point. Unlike War of the Ring, in War of the Ring essentially it's like we have two victory point tracks in a way. So that we have a victory point track for the military part, which you count 1 to 10 to see if the shadow wins, or 1 to 4 to see if the three peoples win. And you have a separate score for corruption, so that if Frodo gets 12 corruption points, then the game is lost. Here, instead of having those two conditions completely separate, we actually have them bundled together. So it's both the corruption and the military part gets summed up in a single score. And at the end of the round, if there is one team which is ahead by more than 10 points to the other team, there is an immediate win. Otherwise, the game goes on until Frodo reaches Mount Doom, and then at that point, in that final round, you will compare the victory points values of the two teams, and whoever has the highest score wins.
So if at any moment one of the team reaches 10 points, this team
10
wins.
points more than
10
the,
points more than the other
team.
team. But if this doesn't happen, the end of the game is with the last card.
Exactly.
Okay, and then we compare.
Exactly.
Do you think that people that hasn't played War of the Ring can approach
Yeah,
this game?
yeah, absolutely. First, the game is much simpler in terms of rules complexity than War of the Ring, and also being just a card game, much faster to set up, much faster to learn. So definitely our hope is that a lot of people will be in this, oh, I would really like to play War of the Ring, but it's too complex and too long.
Yeah.
Will think that approach this game and enjoy it, and maybe after that say, okay, now I want to go to the next.
It's a trap.
It's a trap, yeah. But it's a great game on its own. And yes, I think it's much more accessible, and the fact that it also is scalable to larger group of people also helps. By the way, we also invested a little bit on learning tools. We have created an interactive tutorial with Diced, which is
very cool.
an app which includes tutorials for a lot of games. So there is already an interactive tutorial which is available for the game that would also help players to get into this. And by the way, the good news is that we are creating an interactive tutorial for the War of the Ring board game as well.
So. Very good. Maybe we can translate them, so that would be a good option. So Roberto, this is super exciting. Thank you very much for your time, for releasing this game. We can wait to play it again.
And beat Xavi
again. So thank you very much, and have a nice fair.
Thank you, Pedro.
Hasta la próxima.
Ciao.